everyone, it's Nina. Thanks for joining me today for the reveal of our Paper Rose STAMPtember 2022 collaboration set called All the Thanks. In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can take a simple image and repeat it across your card to create a beautiful background and or focal point, and it allows you to get very creative with those simple images. So here is the stamp set. This is All the Thanks, and there are coordinating dies available to coordinate with this set. I'm going to be using that floral image on the right. We're going to use that to create our beautiful background. We're going to be doing some repeat stamping. So we're going to end up stamping this a total of 3 times to fill the background of our card. I'm stamping this onto some Simon Says Stamp Midnight Green cardstock with embossing ink. And I've already prepped the surface of my paper with a powder tool so that way the embossing powder only sticks to the stamped areas. Once I have the image stamped, I'll bring in some gold embossing powder and sprinkle that on top of the wet ink. We're going to have a really beautiful, striking dark background offsetting the beautiful metallic gold. When I heat emboss a background panel like this, in order to help me not get as much warping when I actually emboss the entire piece, I like to emboss the back before I start embossing the front. And that helps minimize the amount of warping that ends up happening when you heat emboss. If you apply too much heat in one area for a length of time, it will have a tendency to warp the paper. But I find that if you go ahead and add a little bit of heat on the backside first, it really helps cut down on that. So now I'm going to line up that image to the left of the image that we already stamped, and we're going to repeat exactly what we did the first time. Stamp, put embossing powder on top, which of course is the same gold, and then we'll go ahead and heat set this. So we're going to repeat this one more time again, just so that way we get a total of 3 of these flowers across this entire piece. So when you're all done, your piece should look generally like this. I'm going to bring in some Simon Says Stamp Pawsitively saturated ink in Pine and an ink blending tool. I'm going to ink blend this dark color of ink all the way around the edges, but keeping it focused on those edges only and letting the dark green paper be the lighter color. So it's creating a halo and it's making these florals stand out even more. Make sure you buff off any ink that you might have gotten on top of your embossing. And we're going to bring in some gold watercolors. So what I'm doing is I'm mixing a bit of water into my Fine Tech Gold watercolors. Any gold watercolor that you have will work for this. I'm just mixing that up so I can then get it liquid enough to be able to splatter it across my card. I'll let that set aside to dry, and meanwhile I'm going to stamp the thanks greeting onto some of that Midnight Green cardstock with embossing ink. I'm going to use that same gold embossing powder to sprinkle on top of the sentiment, and then I'll heat set this one. So what I'm going to end up doing is cutting this sentiment out, and this will get set on top of the florals. So because of the green cardstock, we're getting that same striking sentiment, which is going to look amazing on top of these florals. So my plan is to have a coordinating sentiment to pair with it. And so I'm going to pull out the For Everything greeting that's also in that same stamp set, and I'm stamping it with Simon Says Stamp Pawsitively saturated WOODSY ink onto some burnt orange cardstock. Now initially I thought I was going to go ahead and trim this down into a rectangle little sentiment strip, but then I decided I wanted to actually fussy cut it so that it was a little bit more of a shadow layer. So I went ahead and put the thanks greeting on top of the florals with Simon Says Stamp thin 3D foam squares, and then the coordinating sentiment is actually going to get popped up with regular 3D foam squares, which are twice the dimension of the thin 3D foam squares. So we have 2 different levels of dimension going on here on the card, which really gives a nice bit of depth to everything. Around the edges of my paper, I'm taking my Simon Says Stamp embossing ink pad and just basically rubbing it across those edges to get that ink completely on all 4 sides. And I'll dip those edges of the paper into some gold embossing powder. So now I'm going to have this really nice gold frame edged around my paper. It's going to tie all that gold in. It's going to add a little bit of a frame element to this piece, and it's also going to provide a nice bit of separation between this beautiful green cardstock and then the card base that I've chosen, which is Simon Says Stamp Cream cardstock. I'm going to pop this up on top of that card base just using some foam tape, and then the final embellishment I used were just a few gem stickers from Honeybee Stamps, and I used this really nice rose gold color. It paired perfectly with the colors of this card, and I just love the striking bold contrast that this card has with the little shimmer from the embossing powder and the gems. Everything just tied together so perfectly. It's a great card for fall. It has all those warm fall feels to it. So I love how this turned out. I hope you were inspired by this card and that you'll try out the ideas that I shared today when you create a card with this All the Thanks stamp set from Paper Rose, which is exclusively available at simonsthestamp.com for STAMPtember 2022. So because this is a limited edition set, it's only available while supplies last, so I encourage you to grab it while you can. Links to the stamp set are below in the video description, as well as all the other products that I used today. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will be back soon with more to share.
Hi there, I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at simonsthestamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.